"Don't cry, mister. You look so sad. Can I hug you?" Those were the words that broke the silence of the Blackwood mansion, and they came from the smallest person in the room. I had worked in beautiful homes before, but I had never seen one that felt so empty. The marble floors reflected the golden lights above. The walls were covered with priceless paintings, and every piece of furniture looked like it belonged in a magazine. Yet somehow, the largest house in New York felt like it had forgotten how to be a home. My name was Emily Carter, and that was my first week working as a maid for Adrian Blackwood. Everyone in the city knew his name. They spoke about him quietly, like his reputation could travel through walls. They said he was a man who controlled businesses, made difficult decisions, and never showed weakness. But when I first saw him standing alone near the window of his private study, I didn't see a powerful man. I saw someone who looked tired. The rain tapped softly against the glass behind him. The city lights reflected in his eyes, but there was no warmth there. He was holding an old photograph in his hand, staring at it like it carried a memory he couldn't let go of. I didn't know who was in that picture. I didn't know what he had lost. I only knew that a man surrounded by everything money could buy looked like someone who had nothing left to hold on to. "Mrs. Carter?" a small voice asked from behind me. I turned and saw Noah Blackwood standing in the doorway. He was 4 years old, quiet, and always watching the world around him with curious eyes. Most children his age filled rooms with laughter, but Noah carried a silence that felt much older than him. "Are you okay?" I asked gently. He looked past me toward his father. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Noah walked slowly into the room. "Daddy is sad," he whispered. I looked at Adrian. He didn't hear us. Or maybe he did, and simply didn't know how to respond. Noah walked closer to him, holding his small stuffed bear against his chest. "Daddy." Adrian turned around. The expression on his face changed immediately, like he was putting a mask back on. "What are you doing awake, Noah?" His voice was calm, but distant. Noah didn't answer the question. Instead, he looked up at his father and said the one thing nobody else in that house had ever dared to say. "You look so sad." Adrian froze. The room became completely silent. Then Noah opened his arms. "Can I hug you?" I watched the man everyone feared stare at his son like he had just been offered something impossible. For a few seconds, Adrian Blackwood didn't look like a mafia boss. He didn't look like the most powerful man in the city. He looked like a father who had forgotten what it felt like to be loved. And then, something changed. His eyes became glassy. His hand slowly moved toward his son, almost like he wasn't sure he was allowed to accept kindness anymore. That was the moment I realized something important. The world knew Adrian Blackwood as a man with power, but his son knew him as a man who was hurting. And sometimes, the smallest heart can reach the places that even the strongest walls cannot protect. The next morning, I expected the Blackwood mansion to return to the way it had always been. Quiet, perfect, cold. But something was different. Adrian Blackwood walked through the halls like a man who had spent the night remembering something he thought he had lost forever. Noah was different too. He followed his father more closely, holding his small stuffed bear in one hand and looking up at him with a curiosity I had never seen before. I had worked with children long enough to understand that silence was not always peace. Sometimes silence was a way of hiding pain. Noah had that kind of silence. Adrian had it too. "Breakfast is ready," I said as I placed the final plate on the table. Noah climbed into his chair and looked at his father. "Daddy, sit with us." Adrian paused. For a moment, I thought he would refuse. The man I had met on my first day was someone who seemed to live by schedules, meetings, and responsibilities. But then he pulled out the chair and sat down. It was a small thing, almost invisible. Yet somehow, it felt like a door opening. Noah smiled. A real smile. I noticed Adrian notice it. He looked at his son as if he had forgotten what that expression looked like. "You are good with him," Adrian said quietly after Noah left the table to show me a drawing he had made. I looked at him, surprised. He just needed someone to listen. Adrian lowered his eyes. "Most people around him are paid to be here." His words were simple, but I heard the sadness underneath them. "That does not mean they care less," I replied. "But children know the difference between someone standing beside them and someone being there for them." Adrian looked at me for a long moment. Most people probably avoided speaking honestly to him. They probably agreed with everything he said and stepped away before showing too much emotion. But I was not looking at a powerful man in that moment. I was looking at Noah's father. "You think you know me?" he asked. His voice was not angry, just tired. I shook my head. No, I think I know what I see. The room became quiet. Outside, the city continued moving. Cars passed. People rushed to work. Everyone chasing something. But inside that mansion, a man who had everything was learning about the one thing he could not buy. Connection. Over the following days, I noticed small changes. Adrian started reading stories to Noah before bedtime. He asked about his son's favorite games. He listened when Noah talked about simple things, like a bird he saw outside the window or a picture he wanted to draw. He was still serious, still reserved, still the same man everyone whispered about. But around Noah, the walls became thinner. One evening, I found Adrian standing near the hallway, watching Noah laugh while building a tower of wooden blocks. He did not realize I was there. He just stood quietly, observing his son with an expression I could not describe. It was not power. It was not control. It was wonder. Then he noticed me. I forgot what that sounded like, he said. I did not ask what he meant. I already knew. He had forgotten what happiness sounded like inside his own home. And somehow, a little boy and a woman he barely knew were teaching him how to find it again. The first time I realized Adrian Blackwood was not afraid of anything was the first time I saw him afraid of losing someone. It happened on a quiet afternoon in the garden behind the mansion. Noah was sitting on the grass with a book in his lap, asking me questions about every picture on every page. The sunlight touched the garden walls, and for once, the Blackwood house did not feel like a place built around secrets. It felt almost normal, almost like a family home. You really think he is changing? Adrian asked behind me. I turned and found him standing near the doorway, his hands in his pockets, watching his son. There was no cold expression on his face. No distance. Just a father trying to understand something unfamiliar. I think Noah is helping you remember who you are, I answered. Adrian looked away. People usually tell me what they think I want to hear. Maybe that is because they are afraid of you. The words came out before I could stop them. The silence afterward felt heavier than I expected. I wondered if I had gone too far. But Adrian did not become angry. He simply looked at me with a quiet sadness. And you are not, he asked. I shook my head. I respect you. There is a difference. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he looked back at Noah. Everyone sees the name, the reputation, the power. Nobody sees the person underneath. I understood then. Adrian Blackwood had spent years building walls around himself. So many walls that even the people closest to him could no longer find the man behind them. Your son sees you, I said softly. Adrian's expression changed. He should not have to worry about me. Children do not need perfect parents, I replied. They need parents who are present. Those words stayed between us. I watched them reach somewhere deeper than I expected. That evening, something small happened. Something nobody else would have noticed. Noah dropped his crayons while drawing in the living room. Adrian, the man who had assistants for everything, simply sat down on the floor and helped him pick them up. Noah looked surprised. Then he smiled. Daddy helped me. It was such a simple sentence. But Adrian froze like those words meant more than they should. Later that night, I found him standing alone near the family photographs. I spent years protecting him, he said quietly. But I never realized I was keeping myself away from him too. I stayed silent. Sometimes people do not need advice. Sometimes they just need someone willing to listen. Adrian looked at the photograph in his hand. After everything changed, I thought being strong meant never showing pain. His voice became softer. I thought if I stayed distant, nothing could hurt me again. I looked at him and finally understood. The man everyone called powerful was not searching for more control. He was searching for a way back to his son, a way back to himself. And maybe, without realizing it, he was finding that path through the one person in the mansion who had never treated him like a legend. I had never been impressed by his money. I had never cared about his reputation. I only saw Adrian, a father, a wounded man, a person who was slowly learning that kindness was not a weakness. It was the one thing he had been missing all along. The Blackwood mansion had changed in ways I never expected. Not because the walls looked different. They were still the same polished marble, the same tall windows, the same quiet halls that seemed to stretch forever. The change came from the people inside. Noah laughed more. Adrian stayed longer at the breakfast table, and I started seeing moments that felt impossible when I first arrived. A man who once seemed unreachable was now learning how to be present. One morning, I found Adrian sitting beside Noah in the library. They were building a small wooden house together. The pieces were scattered across the carpet, and Noah was explaining every detail with the excitement only a child could have. The roof goes here, Daddy. No, not that way. Like this. Adrian looked at the instructions, then at his son, completely serious. I believe my assistant may have given me the wrong blueprint. Noah laughed. A real, bright laugh that filled the room. I stopped in the doorway for a moment, watching them. It was strange how something so simple could feel so powerful. A child teaching his father how to play. A father discovering that time with his son mattered more than any meeting or business decision. Later that afternoon, Adrian found me in the kitchen, preparing snacks for Noah. He asked about you today, Adrian said. I looked up. Noah. He nodded. He said the house feels warmer when you are here. I smiled softly. Children notice things adults ignore. Adrian leaned against the counter, thinking about those words. You make it sound easy. What? Caring. I looked at him carefully. It is not always easy. It is just worth it. Adrian became quiet. I had learned that his silence was not empty. It was usually filled with thoughts he did not know how to say out loud. I used to think providing everything was enough, he finally said. A safe home. The best schools. Everything money could solve. He looked toward the hallway where Noah was drawing. But I missed the things that mattered. I did not interrupt him. For someone like Adrian, admitting regret was probably harder than admitting defeat. I was there, he continued. But I was not really there. That sentence stayed with me. Because I realized something about Adrian Blackwood. He was not a man who needed someone to save him. He was a man who needed someone to remind him that he was still human. Over the next few weeks, I watched small moments become memories. Adrian learned Noah's favorite bedtime story. He remembered which color crayons Noah liked most. He started asking questions instead of giving orders. It was subtle, almost invisible, but I saw it. One evening, Noah fell asleep on the couch after spending the entire day playing with his father. Adrian carefully covered him with a blanket and sat there for a long time, simply watching him rest. I never thought I would have this again, Adrian whispered. I stood nearby. Have what? He looked at Noah. A reason to look forward to tomorrow. For the first time since I met him, Adrian Blackwood was not looking at the past. He was looking ahead. But I did not know then that every beautiful moment we were building inside that house was about to be tested by a truth none of us were ready to face. The first sign that something was wrong was the silence. Not the peaceful kind of silence I had grown used to inside the Blackwood mansion. This was different. Heavy. The kind of silence that made you feel like something was waiting just beyond the door. For weeks, I had watched Adrian change. I had watched a man who once seemed made of stone slowly become someone who laughed with his son, someone who listened, someone who finally allowed himself to be part of his own family. But I also knew that a life built around power always came with shadows. That evening, Adrian returned home later than usual. I was in the library with Noah, helping him finish a drawing he wanted to show his father. The moment the front door opened, Noah looked up with excitement. Daddy is home. He ran toward the hallway before I could say anything. I followed a few steps behind and saw Adrian kneel down to greet him. That small moment still amazed me. The same man who once looked impossible to reach now smiled because his son ran into his arms. I made something for you, Noah said, holding up his drawing proudly. Adrian studied it carefully. This is the best one yet. Noah smiled. Because you helped me. Adrian looked at him quietly. Then his eyes moved toward me. For a second, I saw gratitude in his expression. Not the kind people showed because they were afraid of him. Something real. Thank you, he said. I shook my head. Noah did the hard part. Adrian smiled slightly. No. You reminded me how to be here. Those words stayed with me. But later that night, I discovered that Adrian was carrying a secret he had never shared. I found him in his office looking through old documents. He quickly closed the folder when he noticed me. Everything okay? I asked. He looked toward the window. There are parts of my life that I do not want Noah to know about. I understood. Everyone had things they wished they could leave behind. You do not have to tell me anything you are not ready to share. Adrian looked surprised. Most people would ask questions. Maybe because they want to know the story. I care more about the person living with it. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he sat down and looked exhausted. Before you came here, I thought protecting my family meant keeping everyone away. His voice was quiet. I thought distance would keep Noah safe. I thought control would prevent mistakes. And now? I asked. Adrian looked toward the hallway where Noah was sleeping. Now I realize I almost missed the reason I was trying so hard to protect him. I could hear the honesty in his voice. It was not the voice of a powerful man making a decision. It was the voice of a father admitting he had been lost. But there was something else I noticed that night. A small envelope on his desk with my name written on it. I stared at it for a moment. Adrian noticed. His expression changed. "There is something you should know about why I hired you." My heart tightened. Suddenly, the warmth we had built over the past weeks felt fragile. "What do you mean?" I asked. Adrian looked at the envelope, then back at me. "Emily, there is a reason you came into this house. And I do not think it was a coincidence." I did not know what he meant. I did not know that the answer would change everything I believed about my place in the Blackwood family. I only knew that behind the quiet moments, behind the smiles and the healing, there was still a hidden truth waiting to be revealed. The envelope on Adrian's desk changed the way I looked at everything. For days, I had tried not to think about his words. There was a reason I came into the Blackwood house. It was not a coincidence. I repeated that sentence in my mind more times than I wanted to admit. I had always believed I was just a woman looking for a job, a normal person entering a world far bigger than my own. But now I wondered if there was something I did not know. The next morning, Adrian asked me to meet him in his office. The room felt different than before. Not colder, just heavier. He was standing near the window, holding the same envelope from the night before. "Emily, before you hear this from someone else, I need you to know the truth." I sat quietly, waiting. Adrian placed the envelope on the desk between us. Inside were old records, information about my background, and details about my previous work. I looked through the pages, confused. "Why did you investigate me?" I asked. Adrian looked down. "Because I needed to know who was entering my home." His answer was honest, but it still hurt. I understood his reasons. A man like Adrian had spent years protecting himself and his family. Trust probably did not come easily to him. But knowing he had searched through my life without telling me felt different. "So everything between us started with suspicion?" I asked. His expression changed. "No, that is not what happened." "Then what happened?" I wanted to know. Adrian took a breath. "I saw how you treated Noah during your interview. You did not care about his last name. You did not care about my reputation. You only cared that a child needed someone." I looked away. I did not know what to say. I wanted to understand who could do that, he continued. Because I had spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from me. His voice became quieter. "And then you appeared, asking for nothing." Before I could answer, a small voice came from the doorway. "Are you both sad?" Noah stood there holding his stuffed bear. Somehow, he always knew when something was wrong. I smiled gently. "Noah, we are just talking." He walked into the room and looked at his father. "Daddy, you should say sorry when someone feels hurt." Adrian looked at his son, then at me. For a moment, the powerful man everyone feared disappeared. There was only a father learning from his child. "You are right," Adrian said. "Emily, I should have trusted you enough to tell you the truth." Those words meant more than any explanation. Because for the first time, Adrian was not trying to control the situation. He was admitting he had made a mistake. Later that afternoon, I spent time with Noah in the garden while Adrian watched from a distance. The smile on his face was different, softer. But I noticed something else too. A man from Adrian's past had arrived at the mansion. Someone who carried old information and new questions. I did not know what he wanted. I only knew that Adrian's expression changed when he saw him. The warmth disappeared. The walls came back. And I realized that the peaceful world we had created was about to face its first real test. Because sometimes the hardest part of healing is not learning how to love again. It is learning how to protect. That love when the past comes looking for you. The man who arrived at the Blackwood mansion introduced himself as Daniel Whitmore. I had never seen Adrian react that way before. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was something deeper. A memory he wished he could leave behind. I stood near the garden window, watching them speak from a distance. Their conversation was quiet, but I could feel the tension between them. Noah noticed it too. Children always notice the things adults try to hide. "Is Daddy upset?" he asked softly. I looked down at him and forced a small smile. "Your father is just thinking." But I knew that was not the whole truth. That evening, Adrian became distant again. The man I had started to understand seemed to disappear behind the walls he had built years ago. He worked late. He skipped dinner. He answered questions with silence. It reminded me of the first day I entered the mansion. The day when this house felt empty. I found him in the library after midnight. The room was dark except for the small lamp beside him. You were doing it again, I said. Adrian looked up. Doing what? Pushing everyone away when something becomes difficult. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he looked down at the papers on the desk. You do not know what you are involved in. His words were calm, but they carried a warning. Maybe not, I replied. But I know Noah. That made him look at me. I know a little boy who smiles when his father reads him stories. I know a child who waits by the window because he wants to see you come home. I know someone who finally feels safe. Adrian looked away, and I cannot risk losing that. His voice was different. Not the voice of a powerful man. The voice of a father. Adrian, protecting someone does not mean shutting them out. He closed his eyes for a moment. You think it is that simple? No, I answered. I think it is difficult. But I also think Noah deserves the real you, not just the version of you that survives. The silence between us felt endless. Then Adrian said something I never expected. I do not know how to do this. I froze. Because those words were not weakness. They were honesty. The man, who seemed to have every answer, was finally admitting he needed help. You start by staying, I said softly. You start by letting people care about you. The next morning, something changed. Adrian joined Noah for breakfast again. He listened. He smiled. He tried. But I noticed a sadness in his eyes that was still there. Later that day, Daniel left a message for Adrian. I did not hear everything, but I saw the effect it had. Adrian stood still, holding the phone, looking like he had just been reminded of a promise from long ago. That night, Noah gave his father a drawing. It showed 3 people standing together under a bright sun. Adrian looked at it for a long time. Who are these people? He asked. Noah pointed. Me. You. Emily. Adrian looked at me. There was something in his eyes that I could not explain. Gratitude. Hope. Maybe even a little fear. Because he knew the truth now. He was no longer protecting just himself. He had something precious to lose. And that was exactly why his past was coming closer than ever. The morning after Daniel Whitmore left the mansion, I noticed something different about Adrian. He was quieter than usual, but it was not the cold silence I had seen before. This time, it felt like he was thinking. Like he was finally looking at the choices he had made and wondering if there was another way. Noah noticed it too. Children always feel changes before adults understand them. While we sat together at breakfast, Noah looked at his father and smiled. Daddy, are you staying home today? Adrian looked surprised by the question. Why do you ask? Noah played with the spoon in his hand. Because I like when you are here. Such a simple sentence. But I watched it reach Adrian in a way nothing else could. He placed his coffee down and looked at his son. I like being here too. That was the first time I heard him say it. Not as an obligation. Not as something he was supposed to say. As a truth. Later that afternoon, Adrian asked me to walk with him through the garden. The same garden where I had seen him watching Noah from a distance weeks before. I owe you an apology, he said. I looked at him. For what? For believing that control was the same as protection. I did not expect those words. Adrian Blackwood was a man who rarely admitted mistakes. I spent years thinking if I planned every detail, nothing could hurt the people I cared about, he continued. But I was wrong. I was so focused on preventing loss that I forgot how to appreciate what I still had. The wind moved softly through the trees. For a moment, the powerful man everyone knew disappeared completely. There was only Adrian. You changed this house, he said. I smiled slightly. No, Noah did. Adrian shook his head. Noah showed me what I was missing. You showed me that I was allowed to find it. I did not know what to say, because sometimes the most meaningful moments are the ones where words are not enough. But that peaceful moment did not last forever. That evening, I found Adrian looking at an old family photograph. His expression told me something was wrong. Is everything okay? I asked. He held the photograph carefully. Daniel reminded me of something I should have dealt with a long time ago. I waited. Before Noah was born, I made decisions based on fear. I thought becoming harder would make me stronger. He looked at the picture. But all it did was create distance between me and the people I loved. I understood then. Adrian was not afraid of losing his position. He was afraid of losing the family he had finally started to rebuild. The next day, something unexpected happened. Noah came running into the room, carrying his drawing again. The same drawing of the 3 of us standing together. Daddy, I added something, he said proudly. Adrian looked down. Noah had drawn a small house around the 3 figures. Now we are always together. Adrian lowered himself beside him. His eyes became emotional. But this time he did not hide it. He smiled. Yes, Noah. We are. Watching them together, I realized something. The man who once believed love was a weakness had discovered the opposite. Love was the reason he wanted to become better. But I also knew that healing was not the end of the story. Sometimes, when people finally find something worth protecting, life finds a way to test how much it truly means to them. The day I realized Adrian Blackwood had truly changed was the day he stopped trying to carry everything alone. For years, he had built a life where every decision was calculated, every emotion was hidden, and every person around him kept a careful distance. But now, inside the same mansion that once felt empty, there was laughter. There were conversations. There was a little boy who no longer looked lonely. And there was a man learning that love was not something he had to earn through perfection. It was something he could simply accept. The final test came when Adrian received another message from Daniel Whitmore. I did not know every detail of their history, but I could see the effect it had on him. For a moment, the old Adrian returned. The quiet expression, the guarded eyes, the feeling that he was preparing to disappear behind those walls again. I found him in the study that evening. You are thinking about leaving, aren't you? I asked. Adrian looked surprised. How did you know? Because you always look the same when you decide you have to handle everything by yourself. He looked down at the desk. Emily, I spent my whole life believing that if I stood alone, nobody else would get hurt. I walked closer. But you are not alone anymore. Those words seemed to stop him. Because maybe that was the hardest lesson for Adrian Blackwood. Not how to protect people. He already knew how to do that. The difficult part was allowing people to stand beside him. What if I fail? He asked quietly. It was a question I never expected from him. The man who once seemed impossible to break was finally showing the fear he had hidden for so long. Then you try again, I said. That is what families do. Later that night, Adrian sat beside Noah's bed and read him a story. I watched from the doorway as Noah slowly fell asleep, holding onto his father's hand. The scene was simple, ordinary, but I knew how extraordinary it was for Adrian. A man who once believed happiness belonged to other people was finally experiencing it himself. The next morning, Noah came into the kitchen carrying his drawing. I made a new one, he said proudly. I looked at the paper and smiled. It was the same. Little house from before, but this time there were more details. Flowers, trees, a bright blue sky. Adrian looked at the drawing and laughed softly. You added a garden. Noah nodded. Because happy homes need happy places. Adrian looked at me after hearing those words. We both understood what Noah meant. A home was not created by expensive furniture, large rooms, or a powerful name. A home was created by the people inside it. Months later, people still talked about Adrian Blackwood as one of the most powerful men in the city. They talked about his influence, his success, and the empire he built. But those things were never what mattered most to me. I knew the man behind the name. I knew the father who learned to laugh again. I knew the person who discovered that kindness was not a weakness. It was a strength he had been searching for all along. And when Noah asked me one day why his father was different now, I smiled and answered honestly. Because sometimes, the person who looks the strongest is the one who needs love the most. Adrian Blackwood once ruled a world built on power. But in the end, the smallest hand reached for his and showed him something greater. A family, a second chance, a reason to come home.